Greetings, math fans. All right, so this is day 9, and today's topic is called absolute value equations. So day 9, absolute value equations. So after this, we're going to talk about absolute value inequalities, but this is equations. Equations just means it's got the equal to sign. Okay, that's actually pretty significant. It's got the equal to sign. Okay. So let me just start out really quickly with kind of a basic example here. If I give you, and we're going to work our way towards the most complicated type of problem, but they're really not that bad. So if I said absolute value of x equals 3, my question to you is, what can I substitute in for x to give me my 3? Okay, what can I substitute in? Well, think about it. What do absolute value brackets do, right? What do these absolute value brackets do for variable? Doesn't it make it positive? Okay, so if it makes it positive, what value can x be? Well, can't x be 3? Because what's the absolute value of 3? It's equal to 3, right? What else can x be? Well, can't it be negative 3 as well? Because what's the absolute value of negative 3? It's also 3. And remember, my goal is to get a 3, and that's what I have right there. So the answer, if I actually just kind of rewrote this problem, I said the absolute value of x equals 3. I have two answers. I have 3 and negative 3. So x equals 3 and negative 3. Those are my two answers. Okay? So really what we're doing here is, to kind of put this in a nutshell, we're going to set whatever's inside this absolute value once it's isolated. And when I say it's isolated, that means there's nothing outside of here at all. And we're going to get to more complicated problems where there is, and you got to get rid of it. But basically, once that absolute value is isolated, you set whatever's inside the absolute value equal to that positive and negative of that number. That's all you do. And then you solve. Okay, there's a lot of solving involved here. All right? So let me just kind of give you another example. If I said absolute value of x minus 2 equals 4. So what you're doing, math fans, is you're setting inside the absolute value, so you're setting this equal to positive and negative 4. That's all you're doing. Okay? So let's do that. X minus 2. Well, I'm actually going to get rid of this absolute value bracket, because once you use the absolute value bracket, it's gone. Okay, so let's get rid of that. Oops. And so it's going to be x minus 2 is equal to 4, and x minus 2 equals negative 4. Okay, so positive and negative of that side. Now I solve each one. And guys, please be careful with your positive and negative numbers. If you're not sure how to add or subtract some number, stick in your calculator. Don't get that wrong. It's brutal to get that wrong. So I'm going to add 2 to both sides. And my answer is x equals 6. And I'm going to add 2 to both sides here. I'm going to get x equals negative 2. And there you go. Those are your two answers. And now some of you guys are going, well, I don't understand. How are there two answers for this problem? Not that you have to do that, but if I took those two answers and I plugged them back into my original problem, okay, so in other words, I substitute them back in for x. If I subtract 2 from those and I take the absolute value, I should get 4. So let's take a look at that. If I take 6, let's just kind of do it. If I said 6 minus 2, what's the absolute value? Or 6 minus 2 is 4. What's the absolute value of that? Is 4. We're good. Okay, what about negative 2? What's negative 2 minus 2? Negative 2 minus 2. What's negative 4? What's the absolute value of negative 4? 4. Hey, all right. So 4. Okay, so I get 4 no matter what value, and that's the whole point of this. Okay, I got two answers. I got, in this case here, 6 and negative 2. Both work in this equation to give me my answer. Okay? All right, let's keep going here. A little more complicated again. So absolute value of 3x minus 4 equals 8. All right, so again, this is isolated here. Okay, when I say it's isolated, there's no other terms outside of this. Okay, so I'm setting 3x minus 4 is equal to 8, and 3x minus 4 equals negative 8. Two problems. One is positive 8, one's negative 8. So I add 4 to both sides. So 3x equals 12. And divide by 3. X equals 4. That's the first answer. I add 4 to both sides. So 3x is equal to negative 4. And divide by 3. So x equals negative 4/3. If you put it in your calculator, you get negative 1.33. That would be okay too. Okay? So those are your two answers for that problem. All right, cool. So before we get into a little more complicated one, let's look at this. What happens if I have absolute value of x equals negative 3? So think about it, math fans. What can I substitute in here? What can I take the absolute value of? When I take the absolute value, I get a negative value. Do you guys agree? It's impossible. Because every time I take the absolute value, what do I get? I get a positive value. So there is no way I will ever take the absolute value. I don't care. Absolute value of negative 7. Well, here, let's say put negative 3. Or the absolute value of 3. It doesn't matter. That's equal to 3 and that's equal to 3. I will never get a negative 3. So basically the rule, if absolute value after isolation, okay, it's important, after isolation equals a negative, then no solution. Because it's impossible. Okay, then no solution. All right. That's only if you isolate it, though. And I'm going to give you an example where it's going to look like it's no solution, but I haven't isolated it yet. Okay. All right. So let's get into some problems now that are where you have to isolate it first. Okay, because then that gets a little trickier. Okay. So my goal here, math fans, you make this in red. My goal is to isolate the absolute value first. Okay, isolate the absolute value first. So I can put this here first. All right, so here is a nice little friendly example. So 2 times the absolute value of x equals 8. Well, here's the deal, math fans. When I say to isolate the absolute value, that means I want this to be all by itself. And this is like saying, what I have here, 2 absolute value of x, is like saying this. What's if I said 2x equals 8? How do I get rid of the 2? It's multiplied. So what do? I divide both sides by 2. So this is the same thing. I'm going to divide both sides by 2. And I get absolute value of x equals 4. And now I solve that problem. Okay? So I get x equals 4 and x equals negative 4. That's pretty straightforward. Okay, those are my 2 answers. Okay, so I kind of said isolate the absolute value first. Don't touch the inside. So I'm going to put this in blue. Don't touch the inside of absolute value until isolated. Okay, and we're going to get to a problem like that where you're going to have a lot more stuff in here, and you can't touch it until you get rid of that 2 or anything else around it. Okay, all right. So let's keep going here. What if I said 2 absolute value of x minus 3 equals 7? Okay, so we need to isolate the absolute value. So it's like saying 2x minus 3 equals 7. Okay, this is kind of like a big x if you want to look at it. So 2x minus 3 equals 7. Well, don't you add 3 to both sides first for this one? So you get 2x equals 10. You do the same thing here. I'm going to add, let me get rid of this box. I'm going to add 3 to both sides. And I get 2 absolute value of x equals 10. And then what do I do here? Divide by 2, so I get x equals 5. So divide by 2, absolute value of x equals 5. And then I have two equations, right? X equals 5, x equals negative 5. And those are your two answers for this problem. Okay? All right, so let's keep going. We're going to get to a little more difficult. So what if I have 2 plus, let's say 2 plus 2 absolute value of x minus 4 is equal to, let's say, 10. All right, so please don't, this is like a horrible mistake. Please don't go 2 plus 2 is 4. That's like a terrible math mistake. Okay, and don't distribute that 2. People want to maybe distribute the 2 here. You need to understand, let me erase this part. You need to understand, math fans, that that absolute value is locked into place. You cannot touch this until you isolate it. Very important. So again, this is just like saying 2 plus 2x equals 10. You're going to subtract 2 first. So you get 2 times the absolute value of x minus 4 equals 8. And then I'm going to divide both sides by 2. Okay? So I get absolute value of x minus 4 equals 4. There's nothing else around this absolute value now. This is all by itself. Here I had a 2. Here I had another 2 that I added to it. I did it all by dividing and subtracting or adding, whatever I need to do. Now I have that x minus 4 and the absolute value equals 4. Now it's like the problems we just did before. So literally I'm going to say x minus 4 equals 4 and x minus 4 equals negative 4 and solve. Now I had a student ask me, Mr. Curvis, you have this x minus 4, doesn't that make that positive? It actually doesn't make it positive, okay? What it does is it makes whatever x minus 4 is positive. So if x was 10, 10 minus 4 is 6, it makes that positive. If x was, 3, it would be 3 minus 4 is negative 1, and then it would make the negative 1 positive. All right, so basically you do whatever inside there first, and then that makes it positive. So don't just make, that's a bad thing, is to make that negative 4 positive, because it's not. Okay, so anyway, real quickly, if I add 4, I get x equals 8, and then I add 4 to this, I get x equals 0. So those are my two answers. And again, you can plug it in and check it. If I go back to the original problem, let me get rid of these things here. If I go back to the original problem, math fans, if I plug in 8 in here, here it is. I'm working with this top guy here. 8 minus 4 is 4. The absolute value of 4 is 4 times 2 is 8 plus 2 is 10. Perfect. Okay, if I do 0, 0 minus 4 is negative 4. Absolute value of negative 4 is positive 4. 4 times 2 is 8. 2 plus 8 is 10. There we go. So they both work. They should work. If they don't, then that's very bad. Okay? All right, so let's do a couple more here. This is kind of the nastiest one I can give you. So 3 minus 2 absolute value of 4x plus 3 equals negative 11. That's really the nastiest problem I could possibly give you. And the only reason is because you got stuff on the outside, you got stuff on the inside, it looks negative, and some of you guys are going right now, you're going, hey, Mr. Kerfus, there's a negative right there. So it's no solution. Guys, you cannot make this no solution until the absolute value is isolated. Okay, so please don't do that automatically. Wait until you've isolated the absolute value. All right, so let me do the problem now. First thing I'm going to do, please do not do 3 minus 2. Boo! You subtract 3 from both sides. Okay, and then you get negative 2 absolute value of 4x plus 3 equals negative 14. Okay, and then I'm going to divide by negative 2. And if you notice what's going to happen, it turns positive, which is good because now I actually have a solution. Okay, so now I want you to notice the absolute value is now isolated. There is nothing around it except, of course, the 7. There's nothing around it. So what you're going to do is you're going to say 4x plus 3 equals 7, and 4x plus 3 equals negative 7. Okay, and we solve. So minus 3. So 4x equals 4. Move this down just a little bit. And divide by 4. So x equals 1. And this one, subtract 3. So 4x equals negative 10. Divide by 4x equals, and put that in your calculator, it's fine, but it's negative 2.5. And if you plug it back in the original problem, each one of those is going to give you a negative 11. Okay, it should. Everything should give you a negative 11. All right. So anyway, those are your two answers. So you might see something like this. Let me just do a couple more here. What if you see 3 is equal to absolute value of x minus 4 minus 7? You see the absolute value on the right hand side. Well, kind of like I showed you before, don't keep it on the right hand side. It actually gets a little complicated. Just physically move this to the left and physically move this to the right. No big deal. Didn't change the problem at all. Okay, and then you can see it. Well, I'm going to add 7 to both sides. So the absolute value of x minus 4 equals 10. And now the absolute value is isolated, so now I set that equal to negative 10 and positive 10. So x minus 4 equals 10. X minus 4 equals negative 10. So I add 4 to both sides. X equals 14, and I add 4 here. X equals negative 6. Okay, those are your two answers. Right, it's not that bad, math fans. Okay, but you have to isolate the absolute value. Very, very important. Okay, so a couple more here. 2 minus 3 absolute value of x minus 4 is equal to 11. All right, that's cool. So first thing I'm going to do, remember this is, please don't say 2 minus 3, that's really, really bad. And subtract 2. So I get negative 3 absolute value of x minus 4 is equal to 9. Divide both sides by negative 3. So absolute value of x minus 4 equals negative 3. Okay, you should stop right away because what? I have isolated that absolute value and it's equal to negative. It's impossible. There's nothing you can take the absolute value of that will give you a negative 3. So the answer to this problem is no solution. Okay? So that's kind of the basics of this. Please, again, treat the absolute value as kind of like a big X if you want to look at it that way. So I'm going to if I treat that as a big X, this is like saying 2 minus 3x. To help you solve it, 2 minus 3x equals 11. How do you always, to isolate that absolute value, or to isolate, in this case here, the x, right? You would subtract 2, just like here, subtract 2. So negative 3x is equal to 9, and then you divide by negative 3. So x equals negative 3. That's what I have here. Except absolute value of x minus 4. Okay? So just remember, math fans, if it's equal to a negative, after you simplify it, there's no solution. Otherwise, most of the time, there's 2 solutions to these problems. Most of the time, if there's not a no solution. Okay? So anyway, that's it with equations. We're going to do inequalities for next time, but just got to remember the rules, man. Isolate that absolute value and then set it equal to positive and negative of the other side and solve, and you're good to go. All right? That's it, math fans. Have an outstanding day. Adios. Goodbye.